Hi there YouTube. After a long absence, if you've headed over to check out my channel, having seen Zed's video, then thank you very much and welcome to RAR Knives and Leatherwork. You'll notice I don't put out a lot of content, haven't put out a lot of content for quite some while, and there's a little bit of an explanation owed there, I think, especially to the people who've subscribed to my channel. The issue was that those of you that know me know that I'm a full-time teacher. I remain so up until up until July of this year, 2020, when I retire. And the students had spotted my YouTube channel, and also Instagram, which I had to make private. And the issue was, of course, I also make knives, and it was beginning to get to the stage where a lot of my lessons were, when are you going to make the next knife, sir? When are you putting out another video, sir? So I had to pretty much close the channel down, or at least suspend it, and that's been the case for quite some while. So that's why there's not been much out recently. Anyway, the purpose of this video is twofold: to introduce myself, to show people a little bit of my work, and primarily to the second main reason is to look at something that I've made recently for a friend of mine, Zed who kindly approached me to make a sheath for him and some other goods that are in the pipeline. Zed's a good guy. We've been following each other for many years. Zed's been commenting on my work from pretty much the beginning, I think. I started making leather goods in 2014, I think it was, after the Bushcraft show, and I got into knife making, built myself a workshop and so on. You can have a look back through some of my videos if you wish to see some of my progression. So yeah, on to the main purpose of the video. It's to show you this particular sheath that I've made for Zed, and part of this video will be about stages in the making of it. It's not a complete sort of how-to, I'm afraid. I'm not at a point where I'm technically able to do that. I'm currently doing this on my Samsung camera, Samsung phone camera. I don't have the sort of editing gear. All of this will be done quite simply on my phone. However, at some future point, I will be showing people how to do leather work. So there's a little bit of the stages in the making of this sheath. The sheath, which I'll just hold up for you here, you'll see in more detail on some of the later clips in the video, was made to house an absolutely beautiful knife made by a very good friend of mine, Loz Harrop, who is a superb knife maker. I own several of his knives, these pieces. I hope that's focusing. I'll put some still shots up, and there is some other video later on of this gorgeous thing. And of course you could head over to Loz's channel. I'll put a link in the description below, and I think Zed's going to do exactly the same thing. I would imagine that Loz will be putting up the making of this. I can't even begin to get my head wrapped around how he's made it, how he's done the logo in brass, and the coal roasting, I think it's called, around the top here on what I'm guessing is possibly giraffe bone, is absolutely stunning. So the sheath that I've made to accompany this, I've tried to pick up a couple of, you can see the sort of colours are matching, and I've tried to pick up some of the detailing that he's done around the giraffe bone in the sheath itself. And of course we've also got Zed's logo being replicated on the sheath, and also the belt dangler here as well. The sheath is made of absolute top quality Italian veg tan, about 3.6–3.7mm thick. It's lined with pigskin, as indeed is the belt dangler. Got my logo on the back, Zed's logo fully carved and coloured on the front, and yeah, very pleased with it. See, retention's excellent. Polished the edge up, left it with undyed welt, because I just like that contrast. I think it adds a little bit. Contrast stitching on the front and the back. The quality of the back stitching is important to me. I want it to be every bit as good as the front. Okay, so also made a standard dangler as an alternative, up to Zed really, which he prefers ultimately, and then he can let me know for any future projects whether he wants to go with this style or this style. Right, okay. Something about myself, I am a sort of amateur artisan style leather worker. I make mostly items for bushcraft community, which I'll show you some examples of what I've got in at the moment. It's not a huge amount, but I'll be able to show you some of what other type of work that I do. I am not a custom leather worker. That's outside my remit at the moment. I don't take sort of custom work normally. This was a sort of special one-off for a friend. I have done some custom work in the past, but being a full-time teacher, it's just too time-consuming in terms of the amount of time you have to spend in contact with the client, with the customer. So I treat it as my hobby, and I make goods, and in a way that's how I want it to be, as a hobby. I make stuff. I'm going to have a website so people can see my work. I have a Facebook page as well. I'm on Instagram, RAR Knives and Leatherwork, so people can look me up and look at what I've got available. Really, that's kind of the way I roll. I make something. If somebody likes it, then they can contact me to discuss price. Okay, right. Well, as I said earlier, you're on a phone, so I'm going to have to get up and put it on pause, and then what I'll do is I'll get you closer up to the bench here, so you get a closer look at some of what I've got in at the moment. Okay. All right, so a bit of a jumble on the desk here. I've just sort of chucked things down. I've got some typical, well, I say typical, they're not necessarily typical, but some of the sheaths that I've done in the past. You can see I take a lot of time and effort to get the edges right. The detail is good. You might notice that there's different colours there, and that's two-tone stitching on the front and the back. I'll show you this one. Show the quality of the stitching on the back as well, which I'm hoping is just as good as on the front. Left hand sheath that I did. You can see I've got a lot of stamping tools and things to produce patterns. Obviously I do plain as well some of the time. This one is quite a special one, done with inlay rattlesnake. Don't know if the light's helping here actually. Let's just try and turn this light off, so if the okay, so we'll try that with oh, sorry about that, turn it down a little bit. That's a little bit less glary. Okay, so inlaid rattlesnake, and a little bit of detail, trying to pick up the well, that's not focusing, is it? Come on. Trying to look like a rattlesnake stamped effect on the back. Knife pouches, well, belt pouches for knives possibly. Larger pouches, soft pouch, I've done a few of those. Large scale belts, 2-inch I think that one, done with Sedgwick bridle leather. You can see I dabble with Sheridan style carving. Had a few attempts at that. I'm not too bad. That's a pouch that I made for one of my fabulous Loz knives, Loz Harrop knives. That's a beautiful folder which I think I've got in one of my other videos. And I think it's probably appropriate that we finish with a closer look at the sheath that I've done. I'll just move that light away, try and get a bit less glare, for Zed. And where it seems to be focusing on the background as opposed to this sheath here. Go on, focus. God damn you. There we go, that's better. Some detail. Right, okay. Well, small selection, I know, but I think that gives you a flavour of the type of work that I produce. And I hope you enjoy some of the details in the rest of the video showing some of the stages in making this sheath for Zed. Okay, all the best. Thank you for watching. Okay, next I'm going to add some little details around the edge. Okay, so the little circles and things just again pick up something that Loz did on his design. Okay, so what I'll be doing next is transferring Zed's logo into the main area here. So I'm going to use this tool to this size, I think, to mark out where I'm going to be putting his logo. Just gently pushing into the dampened leather here. It's been cased to give myself a defined edge. Later on I'll cut this with a swivel knife. Okay, so that's the position of the logo. Alright, so what I've done here is overlaid the transfer, which I'm going to carefully go over again with this tool to leave an imprint. I hope I've centered it properly. Got to remember to mark on the outside of this really to make sure that when I cut it I actually get the correct shape of the design. If you mark on these actual lines then things come out too skinny. I'm trying to go around the edge. Sort of on the outer side of these blue lines. Zed's design is not the easiest to copy. It's quite an intricate little design. Anyway, I'm going to carry on with this. I'll bring you back in a second. Okay, so there's Zed's design. Now it's just, pardon me. Now it's just a matter of cutting it out. Now I'm probably going to have to turn you off for this because I need to concentrate on this. I can't be talking, and I might be able to just show you a few of the steps. But the tools that I'll be using, there, this ceramic blade swivel knife, and possibly this one, where the actual blade itself swivels. Just keep moving the piece. Okay. You soon get out of practice with swivel knife. Hopefully this is something I'll be able to do more in a few months when I retire. So I even cut my fingernails for this, because if I don't, I dig and leave marks on the leather. Nearly done. Okay, so there's the logo cut. What I'm going to do now is go around the design, putting the background in, using some really quite small tools, because it's very tight. These, I think the camera will necessarily pick these up, but they basically give this effect. Okay, so I'll get on with that. Not much space. Yeah, it's really quite a tight design, this. So that's why I'm using these particular tools. They're very fine. It's not actually my favourite backgrounder, but it's the only one that will fit this design. I'm sure this is boring as hell, so I'll bring you back when I've finished more of it. Okay, design done. I'm just going to let the sheath dry out, and then I'll start to sort of mask off these areas here with some super sheen. Okay, so what I'm doing here is painting some super sheen onto the raised part of the logo. This will resist one of the colours I'm going to use to get the desired colour. I don't have an exact match for but to get that colour, which is pretty close to Zed's logo, I have to apply this resist. Otherwise it would come out a much darker orange. So a couple of coats of this. Try and make sure I cover every area. On that practice piece, a couple of the areas actually came through darker orange. So, I don't have to be too careful with this because it resists antique gel, but it doesn't resist dye, so if I spill a little bit it doesn't matter too much because the dye isn't affected by it. It'll still stain. The black, I'm going to do the black in a Phoebings Pro dye. Okay, so I'll let that dry. There's no point doing the sheath yet because the sheath isn't dry. Okay, so the design's moved on a little bit. I've gone round, bordered Zed's logo, bordered my logo, and what I've done now is I've rubber cemented the sheath to a piece of cardboard, so while I start doing the background here, tooling this background, the leather isn't stretching too much. You can peel this off. I'm going to be lining this sheath anyway, so having glue on the back, a little bit of glue, is no particular problem. So I'm just going round now with a particular design of backgrounder, sort of like this, and I'm going to complete all the sort of area inside these lines. So I'll crack on with that. Okay, here's the finished sheath alongside Loz's knife. Hopefully you can see how I've tried to pick up that detailing there on the sheath around the edge here. I've done one of my sort of sandwich, well, it looks like a sandwich, doesn't it, welt, and polished it to a pretty high sheen, all pigskin lined, even the dangler. I've done a standard dangler as well. These are new snaps that I've had imported from Germany, and obviously I have no experience with them before, so I've done a standard dangler just in case there's any issues with it. And the back of the sheath.